We do have a table out here. You can find out more information there. Here in Middle Tennessee, our primary focus has been working with low-income house stakeholders and people of faith to urge TVA to increase its energy efficiency programs for a low-income household. We feel like that's a really important thing, both in terms of justice, but also in terms of care for the earth. And we are also working on putting together an e-manual on the website on best earth care practices for houses of worship. And that actually went live, whatever you say, yesterday, and it's just a start, but that's up and running. And of course, the other, we just got started organizing here in Nashville in the spring, and so this is also one of our first really big efforts, this conference. So we are glad that you're here, and we hope that this day will inspire you and equip all of us to be better caretakers of this wonderful earth, this wonderful creation. And I would just add that part of the equipping is the networking. And so please, between sessions, and especially at lunchtime, because we'll have a whole hour for lunch, please visit all of the different tables we have 15 different organizations represented here this morning. And I think that getting to know each other is a big part of what this conference is all about. Just a few things about the flow of the day. You should all have hopefully registered. The registration table was just right out here, and received a printed program. I believe that there's a couple of changes that we're having to make. Unfortunately, as you may be beginning to sense, our keynote speaker, Matthew Anderson, who will be introduced in just a minute, is going to be up on the screens rather than standing here this morning because his flight got canceled from New York. Apparently they're having some stormy weather up that way. So we'll still have Matthew with us, but just not in the flesh. What that means is that he will not be doing his workshop, which was scheduled right after this, and instead Suzanne Langley, who is the executive director of the Birmingham Audubon Society, is going to be doing her workshop that was scheduled for 12:40. She's going to do that instead right after this. So her workshop will be at that time. And that means during that 12:40 slot, we will only have the interfaith panel talking about issues of care for the earth from different faith perspectives. And in a way that's good because we are feeling bad that we're going to have to split some people off from that. Although also during that time will be the tour of the gardens and of the campus, which is going to take place at every breakout session. And just to be clear about where they meet, if you go kind of cat-a-corner that way through the main hall there, and then go out the exit, which is on that side, the south side exit. For those who want to go on a tour, which will run everybody who wants to go up to the garden for that tour that Lynn Wallace is going to lead and some other people from the Creation Care team here. And so that's going to be offered each of the 3 times in the breakout sessions. For those who don't want to go to a workshop, they can go for a tour. The other change is that, and I think it's on your bulletins or on your programs, that there's one mistake about the location of the advocacy workshop, which is at 140, I believe that is. And that advocacy workshop is in room B136. And also the workshop on climate change is in that same room right after this first session at 10:30. And just again, for some instructions on that, it's the one that's the furthest away, so you get a little exercise. Again, you go kind of cat-a-corner across this way, and then you'll see some signs that will take you to a hallway, which is like 2 hallways over from here. And then you go down to the very end of the hallway, but there will be some signs directing you that way. The other workshops, the ones that are not in here or way down that hallway, is in A213, which is just right at the top of these steps here, and there is an elevator to get to it. So, just one other word regarding lunch. We ordered just the right number of turkey sandwich boxes and veggie boxes. So please, when you get your lunch, just get what you ordered. And if you need to double check that, you can check at the registration table. Well, again, I'm just really delighted that everybody is here today. And at this point, the other co-sponsor besides Franklin First United Methodist Church and Tennessee Interfaith Power and Light Nashville chapter is the Cumberland Harpeth Audubon Society. And just want to ask Bill Franks, who's the president, to come up and just say a word about that, and then we'll introduce Tom Smedley, who will introduce our speaker. Bill.
Thank you, Paul, and thank all of you for coming on this wonderful day. We are really going to have a wonderful program, and I just wanted to tell you about Audubon's involvement in this. It came to our attention that the Interfaith Power and Light and the First Franklin were very involved in climate change, and that dovetailed beautifully with our national agenda, which is to reach out to people of all kinds, interfaith people, urban people, and this is our nice introduction to them. So thank you all for coming. And we have a wonderful program and wonderful sessions, and I'm sure you're all going to enjoy it. I think Matthew and Suzanne will expand a little bit more than I have on National Audubon's aims and objectives, so I won't take up too much more of your time. And I'll introduce our longtime treasurer, Tom Smedley, who will introduce our plenary speaker. Thank you very much.
Yes, I'm Tom Smedley. I've been an Audubon member for about 40 years. And I've been their treasurer since 1986. So don't have to do the other jobs that way. I'm here to introduce Matthew Anderson. He began serving as director of Audubon's Climate Initiative in September of 2015. He joined Audubon in the spring of 2013 as the executive director of Audubon, Minnesota, which is located in the Twin Cities. While serving as state director, Matthew was one of the original members of the 4-member work group that developed Audubon's Climate Initiative. He brings a wealth of experience in constituency building, grassroots mobilization, campaign planning, fundraising, and program development. While at Audubon, Minnesota, Matthew led efforts to secure 7-figure conservation funding, expand the state's staff technical capacity, and around prairie and forest restoration, and invest in a greater development, outreach, and communications capacity. Matthew has a rich background with diverse communities on climate change issues, with nearly a decade of experience of working with religious community in particular. Prior to working with Audubon, Matthew spent 2.5 years as executive director of the National Religious Partnerships for the Environment. Before joining that organization, Matthew directed the Creation Care Fund, which provides financial and technical support to Christian environmental grassroots initiatives. His experience also includes serving as the director of environmental and rural advocacy and education for the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, as well as executive director of Faith in the City, a multi-sector faith-based coalition in the Twin Cities. Currently, he serves on the board of the Regeneration Project, which is the national umbrella for Interfaith Power and Light. Matthew graduated from Dartmouth College with a BA in Environmental Studies and was awarded the Downey Family Prize. He is completing a master's in Advocacy and Political Leadership at the University of Minnesota Duluth. So, with no further need to talk, here's Matthew from New York.
Thanks, Tom, for that introduction, and Paul and Regina, and everyone who put this together. I'm very grateful for the invitation, and my only regret today is not actually being there in person with all of you fine folks. I have been looking forward to this since Paul first reached out, in part because this is the marriage or the merger, the coming together of two of the things that I care the most about. One is the unbelievable good fortune that I have to do this work for Audubon, and then the other is my faith and my religion, and the beauty and the power of the religious community to make a positive difference in the world. And the fact of the matter is, if you had told me back in 2004 that either of those two things would have been core to who I am today, wouldn't have believed you, wouldn't have believed a bit of it. At that time, I was not religious, and I had no idea what the National Audubon Society was, or its rich history, or what it was up to, or its great potential. And so today, you're going to hear from somebody who has perhaps the fire or the zealotry of a recent convert to both. A relatively recent convert as a Christian, and as a recent convert to Audubon. So a couple of things here. This is a bit of a bizarre experience, I imagine, for both myself and for you all. All I can see right now is my talking head and Larry's still photo. And I imagine it's a much better scene in person. And I can only imagine there's a little bit of a Wizard of Oz thing going on for you all, as the man behind the curtain is talking. So I want to talk a little bit, just want to acknowledge that. And I'm going to ask you all to help me if the camera freezes up, or I end up talking too fast, or I end up waving my hands in my face too much. Please just steer me in the right direction. But I want to talk a little bit today about Audubon's work on climate, and then I want to talk about why faith, the faith community, matters so much to, I think, the future of tackling what is the most pressing issue facing birds and people and the whole of God's creation. So, as Tom mentioned, I've been with Audubon now just a little over 3 years. And I think what we've seen in the last 3 years is a major step forward by one of our nation's largest and most storied conservation organizations, and frankly, perhaps one of the most, if not the most successful conservation network in the country, if not the hemisphere. And that major step forward is around the issue of climate change. And what are we talking about when we talk about Audubon? We're not just talking about one person sitting in a hotel room in New York. We're talking about a legacy that stretches over 100 years. We're talking about 462 chapters across the country and 1 million members. We're talking about 42 nature centers, which is the second largest system of nature centers in the country, second only to the National Park Service. We're talking about an organization that is a proud partner of an international coalition called BirdLife International, with over 120 partners around the world. So we're talking about an organization that has been around for a while, that has been part of some of the biggest successes in protecting the environment and protecting our natural resources and our communities. And that goes all the way back to our fight that got us started to stop people from over harvesting birds because of that crazy radical idea that bird feathers look better on us than they do on them, that we were pushing birds to extinction at the turn of the 19th to the 20th century. We were pushing birds to the brink of extinction for the sake of fashion, for the sake of beauty, if you will. And people banded together, people recognized the difference between right and wrong, and people took action. Took until really that probably all culminated in 1916, 100 years ago, with the ratification of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act here in the United States. And that landmark treaty and that landmark legislation here in the United States still stands as one of the cornerstones of environmental protection. Fast forward to the middle of the 20th century, and again, you found the people of Audubon, you found the organization of Audubon, the spirit of Audubon rising again in the 50s and 60s and into the 70s, as Rachel Carson called our attention to the danger from DDT and other pesticides and chemicals. In no small way, birds were, in that case, again, the messenger. Birds were the signal, the proverbial canary in the coal mine, about the impact that our actions were having, not just on them, but on us and on the environment. And so again, the people of Audubon and the network and the spirit of Audubon rose to the occasion and made a significant contribution to the banning of DDT. And then from there, we saw the rise of the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act and other landmark safeguards. Fast forward to today, and recently, and Susan can probably speak to this even better than I can, but in just the last couple of years, Audubon has played a central role in helping pass the Restore Act to bring resources and focus to restoring the Gulf and the Gulf Coast after the BP oil spill now over 6 years. And we've done tremendous work as far north as Alaska in protecting areas up there, huge expansive areas up there from being opened up to develop. So even to this day, we're tapping into that passion that people find, not just here in the United States, but all around the world, that passion that people have for birds. Birds are unbelievable messengers as biological indicators, but they're also powerful, emotional, evocative creatures. They're in our backyards. They're on our church campuses, on the campuses of our houses of worship. We hear their song even if we can't see them. We celebrate them in our art. We sing about them. We try to sing like them on occasion. We dream about doing the things that they do so easily. Flight, some of the amazing physical feats. We stand in awe of bird migration, the incredible heroics, almost, if you will, of these creatures, some of which are unbelievably small and somehow unbelievably still almost immeasurably determined, resilient, and brave. So that passion, that love of birds, that love of our communities, that love of the shared space, the shared places, has what has really fueled Audubon for over 100 years. And it's that same passion that we now are bringing to the issue of climate change. Audubon is fortunate to be a science-driven organization with scientists on staff. It was that team of scientists that worked for the better part of a decade, nearly a decade. They worked about 7 years, taking data that had been generated probably by actually some of you in the room. How many of you here in the room have participated in the Christmas bird count? Or how many of you participated in the Christmas bird count? A show of hands. Somebody tell me that some hands up, please. But that data, that Christmas bird count data, formed one of the data sets, one of the critical data sets around birds that our scientists used during this 7-year analysis to marry 40 to 60 years of bird location data with 17 different climate variables, things like high and low temperature, high and low humidity, high and low rainfall, things like that. And we were able to match bird locations, thanks to citizen scientists, with that meteorological climate data. And what that then allowed us to do was to create, if you will, a field guide that is based on bird species and their unique relationship, their individual unique relationship with climate. One way that our staff have talked about it, or that you've heard our scientists talk about it, yes, you could take a penguin and put it anywhere on the planet, but it is uniquely suited to not just the water and the ice, but is uniquely suited to its climate. That habitat, that idea of habitat, it's not just the physical features, the plants, the rocks, the water, but it's the climate as well that makes up a habitat. And so what our scientists released what we released back in September of 2014 was the result of those 7 years of study. And what that study showed us was staggering. I think that's the best way to put it. What that showed us was that of the nearly 700 North American bird species, we had enough data that we felt confident as a science organization to say that we could make projections for about nearly 600 of about 588 of the species, and that we could project out to 2050 and out to 2080 what the impact of climate change would be on those birds and their climate suitable ranges. And what it showed was that of those 588 species, 314 of them are at a greater risk of extinction by 2080 because of climate change. Now, I get the chance to work on behalf of Audubon around this topic, and I consider it an unbelievable gift and a blessing. And I'm still doing that. I don't often say what I just said out loud, right? This is what we've released. This is what we've shared with the world. And now, sort of on a daily basis, I'm trying to. My job is to help prevent that from happening. But when I find myself sharing that with an audience like you, something gets caught in my throat. So I want to step back and just unpack that. 314 bird species, not individuals, entire species, are at greater risk of extinction by 2080. And what are we talking about? Are we talking about some birds that we hardly ever see? No, we're talking about white pelican, the American white pelican. We're talking about the mallard. We're talking about the bald eagle. We're talking about the common loon, my state's state bird. This is a bird that our science, at least, you can go to audubon.org/climate, and what we've provided there in a way that we hope is visually compelling, but then also, again, really rooted in the science and in the power of the data, is on our webpage. You can find the climate projections of the climate model for all 588 species by just typing in their name. And you can type in the common name, and we'll pull up a map for you. And what I would have shared with you today is that are those maps. It's these maps that show you what the climate projections are in 2020, 2050, and again in 2080. And if you were to take that climate map for, say, this bird, the common loon, yes, I travel with a common loon plushie wherever I go. That bird is actually projected to no longer be in Minnesota by 2050. What does that mean? How do you wrap your head around that? I find that I end up wrapping my head around that by putting it into personal context. So for me, I'm blessed to have 3 little girls. I have a 6-year-old named Solveig, a 4-year-old named Freya, and a 2-year-old named Celia. This is the benefit of marrying into a Norwegian family. You inherit unique names. But Celia, who's just 2, by the time she's my age, I just turned 40 in early September. By the time she's my age, there will be no more loons in Minnesota or Wisconsin. So that's how I wrap my head around it. And that is an example of how we feel. We know that talking to people about climate change through the lens of birds makes this issue, which seems far and distant and impersonal, it makes it personal, it makes it real, and it makes it about taking action right now. When I put that into that context for myself, there's nothing else that I would rather be doing than what I'm privileged to do today. Admittedly, I'd rather be doing it in person with you today rather than from the hotel, but there's nothing else I'd rather be doing right now than sharing this news with you. Not because it's particularly good news, but because it's the news that we need to heed, and it's the news that we know is true, and it's the news that we know can inspire us to be great once again, just as we were at the turn of the 19th to 20th century, just as we were when we were great battling against DDT. We can be that great once again. So what is it that we're going to do to be that great? What is it that Audubon is calling on us to do once again? Well, it might seem a little simple, but here it is. We're asking you to be what hope looks like for. We're asking you, asking all of us to create a greater demand for solutions, a greater demand for leadership, and create a greater demand for change. And why does that matter? Why does Audubon think that's important? Why do we think we have a role to play in that? First off, it's that huge network that I talked about, and that Susan Langley there represents, that the chapter there represents 462 chapters across the country, 1 million people, a namesake who is still taught in American history courses, John James Audubon, a magazine that reaches 4 million people. We have a big reach and a big footprint. It also, why do we think this matters? Because 40% of our members are Republican or independent. We're not like every other conservation or environmental group that is perhaps purposefully left of center. We're Main Street. We're everybody. You're a Big Tent. Not only are we 40% Republican independent, we're 60% Democrat. We are one of the last few institutions, organizations, networks, whatever you want to call us, where we all come together. And it's because of that love for birds. And we know through our own research, our focus work, that talking about birds, talking about climate through the lens of birds, cuts through partisan rhetoric. It helps depolarize the issue. It takes an issue that has become unnecessarily divisive, and it gives people common ground. And we've seen that in North Carolina, we've seen that in Ohio, we've seen it in Minnesota, we see it in Washington State. I dare say that we could see it just as well there in Tennessee. And that voice, that Big Tent, that middle of the road presence, that Main Street presence, that's needed. We know from hearing directly from public leaders, either at the local level or the state level or the national level, that they don't hear this demand for solutions, this demand for change from folks like you in the room. They're not hearing about it. They might be hearing about it. They might see an ad on the Metro in DC, or they might get a form letter that has been signed or a form email that floods their inbox, right? But they know what that is. They know that that's a campaign that someone has spun up and is running, right? So it gets discounted. What they're not hearing from, and who they're not hearing from, is you all, and they're not hearing from you in a couple of key ways. And this is what Audubon aims to do: is to help provide. We aim to provide actions that you can take and a platform for you to get your voice out. So we think that doing simple things in our life, in our daily life, and taking those all together, adding them up, and making sure that our public leaders hear about them is going to lead to that demand for change that we need. So a couple of quick examples. One would be Plants for Birds, a program that National Audubon has just launched, a program, frankly, that National Audubon launched because after years and years of individual chapters or state offices with Audubon developing and rolling out their own native plants programs, it became clear that this is something that not just Audubon members across the country, but people all over the country, regardless of their organizational affiliation, love to do. We love to plant plants. We love to make our yards beautiful. We love to make our communities beautiful. We love to create more habitat for birds. And it turns out that that's a really good thing to do, not just because of the threats to habitat, but it's a hugely important thing to do in the face of climate. It's an unbelievable opportunity, and it's unbelievably important that we create this native habitat for birds to give them a chance. And we need to create as much of it as possible. So we think that by people planting native plants, whether it's in Nashville or Tucson or Oklahoma or Birmingham, that by planting native plants in your communities and then taking the step, either taking a photo and emailing it or taking a photo and printing it and mailing it in, that by taking the step of sharing that committed action, that authentic action driven by care of your community, driven by your passion for birds, driven by your concern over climate, sharing that activity with your mayor, with your congresswoman, with your senator, that is what we need to do. That's what we think creating a greater demand for change looks like. We will take action. We will show you what it is that we are doing as committed citizens, as committed bird lovers, as people of faith, and we are going to ask you to lead. You want to be an elected official in this country? Lead. Lead on the greatest issue, the greatest challenge to birds and people at this time. Lead. Tell us what it is that you're going to do to make Tennessee a clean energy leader. If climate change is the greatest threat to birds and people, then clean energy is perhaps the best solution to climate change. So that's what we want to hear from you. That is the message that we want to convey to our public leaders. Certainly, we'll have thoughts as an organization about the potential solutions that they'll recommend, be it wind or solar, energy efficiency, other things like that. But we need to begin to expect more from them. And I'm not just saying members of Congress. I think it goes all the way down to our local public leaders. And we need to ask them to tell us. We are waiting, listening. We want to hear from them, and we want to take action. So whether it's plants for birds, or it's going to be helping Audubon members and others go make 10,000 homes solar in the next 3 years, whether it's getting to invite our members of Congress to go birding with us this next spring, or continuing the citizen science that was the underpinning of our report 2 years ago through a new program called Climate Watch. Audubon is going to take action on climate. We're going to work to protect the most important places that matter for birds today and in the future impacted by climate, these so-called climate strongholds. We're going to protect those places, those large-scale places, as best we can. And we're going to do that. And as we do that, we're going to ask our leaders to lead. We don't have the solutions as Audubon. We don't have all the policy expertise. There are plenty of think tanks. There are plenty of energy organizations. There are plenty of companies that have millions of billions of dollars to spend on R&D and can see their own way forward on these solutions. They need to hear from us. They need to hear from you that this is what is needed, not 20 years from now, but today. So that raising our voice that way is once again our unique role. It's what we did back in the late 1800s, 1900s. It's what we did in the 50s and 60s and 70s. We raised our voice and we demanded change. We demanded solutions and we demanded leadership. And I think therein lies the contribution that Audubon has made before and will be the contribution that we make again. I want to pause. I want to sort of stop there and make a little bit of a transition, and then hopefully move us into a time for question and answer as best we can in this setup. But why do I think, or what do I think the role of communities of faith is in all of this? And I try as often as possible not to say faith community. I think it is it's a diverse world with different traditions and great variation and complexity and beauty within traditions and between traditions. And I'm not a religious scholar, not clergy in tradition. I am 11 years into my own Christian faith journey, one that has meant an enormous amount, and has led to reconciliation within my family. One that has led to a career before Audubon that I would never have imagined, let alone uh, strive had wanted. And the power of communities of faith to bring about change is all throughout history, even in our own country's history. The communities of faith have been a significant part of every step forward in our country's history. Every step forward, you've had a role. We've had a role. And that role is there again for us, whether it's Interfaith Power and Light, which I have the fortune whose board I have the fortune to serve on, whether it's the National Religious Partnership for the Environment, whether it's an individual congregation, an individual synagogue, individual tradition, that role has always been there for us as communities of faith. Why? Because we speak something that is more than any one of us, because we speak to hope in the face of what seem like overwhelming odds that are beyond our understanding. Uh, the phrase, peace, may you be filled with the peace that passes all understanding. If we don't need that now, in the face of climate, the peace that passes all understanding of this challenge that is one of the greatest challenges that, if not the greatest challenge that has ever faced us, I don't know when we need a peace like that. We need a hope that passes all understanding. We need a faith that endures. And for many in the room, I only wish I was there to meet and appreciate the diversity of people in the room, the diversity of faith experiences in the room. For me, I find that enduring peace, that enduring hope, that enduring faith, and that enduring love. I find that in my faith in God through Christ. And I firmly believe that we have been entrusted with the gracious gift of creation from a creator God, and we have been given a sacred duty, a sacred responsibility to care for this creation. I see that creation in the common loon. I see that creation in you. I see that creation in my daughters. I see that creation in the annual train migration that erupts in this unbelievable display of power and life on the plains of Nebraska. I think Regina Proctor saw that gift of creation today, the two deer and the albino deer. Those of you at Franklin Methodist see it perhaps surrounded as you are by the 100+ acres that you have been gifted. And when we've been given a gift, it's different than us having to take care of something that, in some ways, gifts can be taken for granted more easily than something that we created ourselves, right? And we tell ourselves, I care about this more because I did it myself. We have to fight that. We have to, in fact, embrace caring more for this gift than we would if we had created it and we had some deep responsibility because it was ours. We have to care for it more, not in spite of the fact that it's not ours, that we didn't make it, but because we didn't make it. It was a gift that has been freely given. It is a gift that we don't get to hold on to. And it's a gift, in fact, that we are required to give again, right? We have received and we will give. We will give this gift forward. And it is hard to imagine any of us in our daily lives being given a gift and then using it and tarnishing it and diminishing it, and then coming across that gift month, 2 months, 3 months from now, and then thinking, I should give this used, tarnished, degraded gift to somebody else. I bet you would enjoy that as much as I did. No, it never crosses our mind that way, right? And so I think we have what we need from communities of faith, what we need from religious communities is the inspiration, sometimes drawn from hundreds of years, sometimes drawn from thousands of years. This inspiration that comes from this current that cuts across all religious traditions about caring for this world. You find it, the consensus is out there. Certainly the Pope's recent encyclical, crystallized that or brought that to the fore in a powerful way. But the Orthodox Church has been there. Jewish traditions have been there. Mainline Protestant traditions have been there. Certain orders within the Catholic Church have been there. And by being there, it's not just a recent 20th century arrival. In some cases, it's centuries, if centuries old, if not older. This commitment, this awareness, this celebration of this sacred duty that we have all been given. And so I think that therein lies the real joy, the real opportunity, the real obligation of community of faith is to be that voice of care, that voice of hope, that voice of joy. And so just as Audubon is looking to inspire people because we are what hope looks like to a bird, I think religious communities, that faith communities have that same opportunity, right? And I think we will have the opportunity to point out, to celebrate successes and leaps forward when we make them, that ability to rejoice. And we might at some point need to look to faith communities to help us grieve. Well, already we're seeing small island nations and communities needing to relocate. How do we support them and their religious traditions, be they indigenous, cases in the South Pacific now, Christian? How do we support the community of Shishmaref, Alaska, which is 90+% Lutheran, as they move from their barrier island, which they've inhabited for hundreds of years, and they are being forced to relocate? What is the role of religion and faith and spirituality in helping people deal with that kind of loss? What will be the role of communities of faith if and when we lose a bird species? How do we celebrate what was? How do we celebrate that gracious gift that is now gone? Right? And then how do we harness that loss and that grief to inspire us to not let it ever happen again? I think there are real questions for not just religious leaders and clergy, but for all of us about how we will address that. And so I think what you all are doing here today, and this joint set of workshops, this joint experience, the sharing of perspectives, hopefully the renewal of some relationships and connections, and the gift of new relationships and connections. What you all do today is incredibly important, and it might not be as important as what you do tomorrow. Because what you do tomorrow will be based on what comes out of today, but what you do tomorrow is really going to set your path and your way forward in response to climate. And I think what we need across the country are 1,000 things that are like this that are happening today in Nashville. 1,000 more of these in the next 3 years. We need 7. We believe that Audubon wants to bring 700,000 people to take action on climate for the first time just in the next 3 years. In Tennessee, that looks like, when you break that all down and everything, what I would what I would say if I were there to you, I would look out into the room. I would say, we need, from those of you gathered here today, we need you to inspire 3,000 people in Tennessee to take some sort of action around climate change in the next 3 years. We need you to plant plants for native birds. We need you to help people put solar in their homes. We need you to advocate for clean energy at the municipal and the state level. And we need you to sit down and talk to our elected leaders, our public leaders, and ask them, what are you going to do to lead? What's your plan? And we need 3,000 of you to do that in the next 3 years. It seems like a lot, and yet it also is not that big of a number. And yet that number could be quite significant. That those people could make an unbelievably significant impact on our future. And just the act of doing all of those things, those little acts will make the world a better place. And it's possible that those little acts taken all together make the world an incredibly better place. So I'll stop there. I don't know about you, but I've gotten a little tired of looking at myself on video camera.
Thank you. This is Paul. I'm just going to act as a little bit of an MC
So,
here, and just go ahead and let's see if there's some questions.
Great.
And I guess will it work if people just yell them out, or I can repeat them? We'll see.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll see.
All right. Okay. So let's hear a question from somebody. Yeah, back there. Well, I got some back there. Yeah. Yeah. Susan.
One of the challenges he was talking. Okay. Susan Shannon in Nashville. And Matthew, you were talking about speaking to elected officials and letting them see, real faces and real people caring about these issues. And I just wonder, in Tennessee, I have actually tried to do this. It's a little challenging. I mean, we have elected officials in the legislature that dismiss, I don't mean to be disparaging of any particular individual, but I don't get the feeling that they take this issue seriously, some of the individuals I've spoken to, and so how many of us does it take for them to realize that there is a legitimate concern here? I guess that would be my question. I don't know how I can answer that because it's not really, it's more of a rhetorical question. If we act and react and they're not listening, it feels a little frustrating to say the least.
for sure. So I really appreciate that that personal story, and I think it's an example that many people, or it's something that many people have experienced. Your example is your experience is shared by many others, and I guess I have a couple of thoughts. One is there's the Brock Evans, who I think many folks would credit Brock with being the driving force behind the Endangered Species Act. Would say it boils down to constant pressure being constantly applied, and that you never really know. You don't know that you're gonna get the change that you're driving for until it actually happens. It's one of those tireless acts, one of those tireless commitments that you make to keep moving ahead. And maybe actually that's another place where the importance of faith communities comes in. Where do you find assurance or confidence that your actions matter, and in the face of no evidence that they're making a difference? And I think lots of religious traditions speak to that, speak to the necessity, in some ways the nobility, in other ways the need, the requirement, the obligation, the duty to have that kind of discipline, to have that kind of commitment, and to then have faith, to believe. I will say I think there are a number of examples, some that one that comes to mind around climate specifically. which is maybe appropriate given the election season we're in. Back in 2000, we didn't have any of the candidates really during the primaries, at least, speaking about climate. Even then, Vice President Gore, who's since gone on to clearly become an advocate and a champion, former senator of you folks in the room, that even during that primary, he wasn't talking about it. His answer to lots of questions about it was read my book, and certainly the book addressed it. But Bush wasn't talking about it. Alan Keyes, John McCain, and then ultimately in January of 2000, after McCain had been asked the question repeatedly, "What's your plan?" Just as all the candidates had been in New Hampshire, Senator Bradley as well. They'd all been asked this question by dozens of youth, if not hundreds of young folks in New Hampshire, maple sugar stand owners, ski resort owners at town hall meetings all over New Hampshire. And finally, McCain, the weekend before the primary in New Hampshire, said, "All right, I've heard this question a ton. I don't know what to do, but if I'm elected, I'll commission a special, I'll call a special congressional commission that'll come back within a year with recommendations on what we do." And I share that story because I think it's an example of that endless pressure, endlessly applied, and then an unexpected result from an unexpected quarter. And he then went on for the better part of the 2000s to be a climate champion. And so I don't know all the elected officials there in Tennessee, all the public leaders, but somewhere in there might be the next McCain. There might be the next, who knows? Maybe the next great champion of climate is going to be the Republican version of Al Gore from Tennessee, and it might be your conversations with him or her that contribute to that. And I think that's part of the challenge of this work. It's part of the beauty of this work, and it's part of the why it's necessary to do this work in community with each other. So I'll stop there.
Say who you are.
Okay. Yes, like Susan, I think her name was. I need to do a lot myself, and I really have gotten to the point where I really feel hopeless. And so my question to you is, why don't you go after Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates and people like that who can really do something? Instead, it's wonderful what they are doing, curing disease and all, but this is much more important than that even. I mean, if you're going to prioritize really important things, I think climate comes first. So do you have any action in any plans for going after billionaires? That's my question.
I will say that I have not thought about those two that way, and we as an organization haven't discussed that. I know of some people in the climate and energy space who are doing that work and trying to work not just with those two incredibly wealthy and influential individuals, but with other companies and large corporations. And I think that's, again, this is the value of that, and the value of that approach combined with our approach is that because of the enormity of the challenge, probably all of these efforts are needed, right? We won't know until we're able to look back on it what the turning point was, or how the different individual pieces fit together, and what created the successful puzzle for us. So I think you're right to acknowledge the importance and the influence and the very real world power that those two and others like them have. And you're not doing anything with them, but we know that there are other folks who are trying to work with them and influence them and steer them in this direction.
Matthew, I would just add that one of the workshops today is going to be on advocacy, and Dan Dranko is going to be leading that along with Brandon Pruitt.
Great.
And there's a lot that's going on right now in Metro Nashville, particularly with our new mayor who does care about these things. And so there's lots of opportunities for community pressure there to push her as far as we can, because she does have the right spirit about that. And so just to let those who are interested in the advocacy side of things, that would be a workshop I would recommend. So others, need I think next. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think one of the things that we have done really well over the last 10, 15 years in the climate space is we've gotten really good at criticizing those who aren't doing anything or aren't doing what we think they should be doing. And I think we have done that sometimes at the expense of not celebrating the successes or thanking those who are leading. And so particularly if you all there in Nashville have a mayor who is leading, a mayor that is leaning into this, a mayor that is forging ahead and creating change, and could be and is a model for others, not just in Tennessee, but around the country. Embrace that, lift that up, seek those opportunities to thank, congratulate, promote, what have you. I think the narrative has to change for us, that we are now in an era that requires solutions and leadership, and we will get more leadership both by pointing out shortcomings and by pointing out places where that leadership is happening and it's real and it's meaningful, and in some ways that might be even more significant. And I think we are either at that tipping point, we are coming awfully close to that tipping point where the narrative will change to be one of almost entirely about solutions and the benefits of that kind of leadership and the benefits of communities forging ahead. And whether it's Nashville or Bogota, Colombia, or Seattle or Rochester, Minnesota, we're starting to see that leadership, and that has to be the examples that we lift up. Those have to be part of what we're talking about, not just about the leaders who leave us wanting more and are disappointing us.
Good.
Hi, I'm Anita, and I'm in seminary, and I also am an environmental educator for preschoolers. And my question is that it strikes me that a lot of communities of faith are really uniquely positioned to advocate at all sorts of different levels because we're intergenerational communities. And so how, I know, like, what do you have to say about that, or how would you encourage people to really seek intergenerational cooperation and understanding as we're confronting these huge issues?
I think it's a great question. It's a great observation. A couple things come to mind. One is at Audubon, we like to think that one of our roles, being a mainstream organization, is that of convener, that we're able to bring together different sides or conflicting sides around an issue and look for the solution and forge that solution. Communities of faith are probably even better at that than we are, for all sorts of reasons, and not least of which, you've got a place to bring people. Communities of faith have that history, that tradition, and that expectation from others about being that safe place, that convener role. It's what you all are doing today. And so I think that'd be one place to start, is actually intentionally pulling together different generations. And then I think we talk about intergenerational conversation, and in my experience, what that leads to is we think about how can we talk to the other generation or another generation, instead of looking at those opportunities and intentionally structuring them in a way that is about intergenerational listening first before intergenerational conversation. And And I think that's another thing that we often ask the faith, we ask communities of faith to speak about these issues. And one of the things that we offer ourselves and to others is a place to be heard, is a place to listen. And I think, you hear the speak truth to power, you hear speak to the issues of the day. And really, one of the things that you find in just about every religious tradition that I'm aware of is practice around listening, practice around silence, and practice around hearing, um, prayer, meditation, what have you. And I think that is one of the unique contributions that different religious traditions could bring to that intergenerational conversation, is emphasis on bringing them together to first hear from each other. I think you're doing great work. It sounds like fascinating, by the way.
Good morning. My name is Deanna Bowden, and I'm with the National Climate Action Team. We work to get clean power onto our regional grid, local grid here, and we often get pushback off the top of our legislators or other people's heads that, oh, solar or wind will hurt the birds. That will kill the birds. Now, I think that climate change is a much more bigger threat to the birds. Does Audubon Society have an official position on adding solar and wind and how that will affect the birds?
Yeah. So it's a great question. A couple of thoughts on that. Yes, we believe firmly that clean energy is right at the center of the solution to climate change. We think that it includes wind and solar, and we think then that what that requires from us is to push for bird-friendly solar and wind. So as we're tackling the greatest threat to birds, we want the solution to that threat to not needlessly contribute to or needlessly harm birds. We recognize that individual birds, individual animals may be harmed, may die because of these technologies. And our goal is to clearly we want to minimize that through proper siting and proper permitting and everything like that. Feral cats and buildings right now are killing more birds than renewable energy. And climate, renewable energy is a significant part of the solution to the greatest threat to birds. And so we want bird-friendly renewable energy, but we want renewable energy because there is no bird-friendly climate change that's going to happen.
Stuart.
Hello, I'm Stuart Clifton, and actually a lobbyist on behalf of environmental issues for Tennessee conservation voters. Although I'm primarily here today as an active member of Glendale Baptist Church, which has an ongoing green team, which is fairly active. But I did want to just follow up and thank you for your emphasis on individuals being involved. I know this isn't just about public policy, but just to follow up a little bit, our state legislature, which is 75% Republican, this year members decided to sponsor bills to put a major tax on people who bought hybrids or electric cars. So they filed that bill. Similarly, they filed the bill to forbid gas taxes, which is how we fund our transportation system, from being used to help build greenways or bike paths or to use bike paths. So that's pretty terrible. But what people kind of didn't get was the end of that, because they both got defeated by a 75% Republican legislature. They didn't get passed. And they got defeated not because of the lobbyists, but because individual cyclists and walkers and owners and manufacturers of electric cars decided that was a really bad idea. So I just wanted to confirm that even in a state which most would consider not very environmental in public policy, putting your own self in the struggle and getting involved with the issue makes the difference almost every time. We don't win all the time, but when we do, it's because of people being involved. Thanks.
And I don't want to disparage anybody who is from California or Seattle or New York City or Connecticut or these places that are already leading on this issue. But in some ways, the activities that you folks take, the change that you folks make, um, the voice that you raise, the leadership that you help create and foster in Tennessee is going to matter more in the short term because of who you are and what you represent and your state and where it is and how people outside of Tennessee or outside of Oklahoma perceive it, right? If there's positive change, if there's positive action, if there's leadership, there's momentum in places like Tennessee or Oklahoma or Birmingham, Alabama, um, that leadership in the next couple of years, those steps forward, those are huge. Those might be even bigger at the end of the day in the next few years than one more step forward in places where there's already great leadership and action happening. And so that role that you play, that potentially outsized role that you all have, that outsized impact that you all might be able to make, is an awesome opportunity, and one that I think the time has come for us to see, and I'm hopeful about that.
My name is Lori Burkhead, and this is more of a comment. I believe that all of us to get involved in projects that are huge contributors to pollution and to climate change, and we're in a unique position, especially right here in Nashville. If there are projects, two of them that are bringing gas compressor stations to the community, which will be contribute greatly to methane and other greenhouse gases. We in Nashville have laws on the book. There's groups that have been fighting this for some time. We have legislation in place that says it's against the law to put a gas compressor station in the middle of residential areas because of the impact that they're going to have on wildlife and on our air quality. We're hoping that our mayor will stand up for the laws that are on the books now to enforce that, and having people that help to encourage that. Those of us who are standing up and saying, yes, it's the right thing to do, like you said, getting involved in individual projects will help to create that overall. The end result that says we want clean energy. We want and encouraging our politicians to do that. We, along with Gary Moore and others who had some. Gary is a former state representative and helped to get our politicians on board. Just as was commented earlier, that we're in the state of Tennessee, but yet and predominantly a Republican state, but with enough people, it's a numbers game, and people finding together to stand up for that.
Thank you, Lori. We've only got 3 minutes left. I've got one real quick.
Hi, I'm Renee Wood, and lady over there, I totally agree with about trying to get people billionaires involved, but most of us don't have a lot of money. But we can all do something, like there's all kinds of programs here about the national parks, stop non-stop removal, but we can all pay causes and give $10 a month, online campaign, $10 to $25 a month, and encourage our friends. And as a grassroots, in addition, definitely need money people. Great, we get billionaires, but since most of us are not, we can do our, a little bit every month and pick the causes that we want to support.
Okay, Matthew, you get the final word here. 3 minutes.
Well, I just want to thank you all for a couple of things. One, for coming together bringing Interfaith Power and Light, Franklin Methodist, and Audubon together. I'm 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 grateful and I'm proud that you all hosting this event. This again, I think this is the kind of thing we need to see 100 more of or 1,000 more over the next couple of years. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for being patient and gracious around the travel challenges, the technology here, and then lastly, I would say I would ask for one thing and share one thing. What I would ask for is I would ask that each of you do what you can, and do everything you can. And when you think like you think that you've done everything you can, find a friend, find an Audubon chapter, find an Interfaith Power and Light chapter, and ask if there's something else that you can do. And if you get tired doing that, think about what it is that is the most important thing to you. Is it your faith? Maybe that's where you find your inspiration. Is it your love of a winged creature? Maybe that's where that motivation comes from for you. But whatever it is, climate change, there is going to be something that will motivate you to take one more step and one more action on climate, and creating this demand for change, this demand for leadership, this call for solutions, raising our voice that way over the next 2 to 3 years is without a doubt the most important thing for those of us in this country, those of us in that room together, the most important thing for us to do over the next couple of years. And I, for one, am going to be counting on you. I, for one, am going to hold you in prayer. I, for one, expect great things out of Nashville the next 3 years. And we're here to help. The National Audubon Society, the chapters, the Climate Initiative. If there's something that you think we can do to help, if there's something, some questions you've got, sources that we can point you in the direction of, please don't hesitate to ask. We're in this together, however remote it might seem today. We're in it together. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you, Matthew, and we look forward to working more with you in the future.
Great. Farewell. Have a wonderful afternoon.
All right. Thank you. All right. Great. Well, that worked out pretty well. Thank you for your.